you notice that flying just keeps getting worse? Between the shrinking seat sizes, the mass cancellations, and the advent of the pay for literally everything separate model, you might be thinking to yourself that air travel couldn't get any worse. But you would be wrong. JetBlue and Spirit Airlines are trying to merge, and if it's approved, it's going to make services even crappier and the prices even higher. So I wanted to find out how a few massive airlines could get away with making record profits while the services they offer continue to get more and more terrible. This is a story about how politicians, bankrolled by corporations, have allowed just 4 airlines to have near total control over your flying experience. Buckle your seatbelt and prepare for takeoff. We're about to find out how flying became a nightmare and what we can do to fight back.
The past 24 hours I've experienced the worst airport experience
to my next destination.
Frontier Airline,
United Airlines is such a
how you should never fly Delta.
So let's boil it all down. Why is this happening? What is this all about?
That's Bill McGee. He's an aviation expert who knows a thing or two about flying.
In the 1960s and 1970s was actually a much better experience for consumers. Pricing made sense because it was based on cost. Seats were not only comfortable, they were not a threat to safety. Amenities and service were at a peak, and airlines competed based on service.
And he's not kidding. Back then, planes used to have spiral staircases, grand pianos, and full-service bars with room to move around in the sky. These days, it feels like getting a bag of chips on board is like hitting the lottery. So how did they have it so good back then?
Well, prior to 1978, the government controlled the airline industry. And by control, it meant that they not only decided what airlines could fly where and how often, but they also determined the prices. And then the feeling in 1978 was that the best way to expand airline service would be to deregulate it and to allow the quote-unquote free market to take over.
Well, that sounds promising. How did it work out?
None of that has really worked out. When deregulation took effect in late 1978, suddenly there was an influx of new airlines. In fact, we saw about 50 new airlines in the 1980s. None of them are around anymore. I think it's fair to say now, 45 years later, that airline deregulation has been a failure.
You see, without all that regulation in place, there was nothing stopping the biggest and most successful airlines from eating up all the little guys. In fact, the marketplace has gotten so bad that from 2007 to 2021, there wasn't one single new passenger airline in the entire US industry.
We have fewer scheduled passenger airlines in the United States than we have had since the first ticket was sold in Tampa in 1914.
Right now, American, Delta, Southwest, and United own 82% of the US airline market.
There's no question, the big 4 airlines, each one of them is now too big to fail.
And with this much consolidation over the industry, these carriers can basically do whatever they want. They can price gouge, they can shortchange customer service, they can nickel and dime their own employees, all without ever losing any customers.
The industry has not only become too big to fail, but I believe this sincerely. I think they've also become too big to care.
And this is how it's about to get a whole lot worse. JetBlue is trying to merge with Spirit Airlines. And if they're successful, JetBlue would become the 5th largest airline in the US. But why is that such a big deal? If they aren't one of the big 4 that control the whole industry, then what's so bad about it?
The only reason that fares are as low as they are on average is due to the ultra-low-cost carriers like Spirit. And if Spirit goes away through merger with JetBlue, there is no question. All you have to do is take out Spirit's route map, look at every single city that Spirit serves, and you can guarantee that fares are going to rise in all of those cities on all of Spirit's routes.
Take Detroit, for example. Spirit offers tons of nonstop flights out of the city, while JetBlue operates much fewer. If they merge, it's likely that JetBlue would cut down on flights, forcing consumers to pay higher prices for the ones that remain. And Detroit won't be alone. Lots of other cities would face the same problem. This is an important point. It's the legal argument that gives the Biden administration standing to block this merger. The law gives them the power to block mergers that stifle competition and give consumers fewer choices. And there's no question that that's exactly what this merger would do. Sounds like we could soon be looking at paying JetBlue prices for Spirit service.
At the end of the day, competition is good.
That's JetBlue's own president and COO, who later goes on to say,
And JetBlue needs to be bigger to compete with those much bigger carriers.
But wait, something doesn't add up here. If bigger companies and more mergers led to more competition, then why aren't we seeing any new airlines in the industry? And why are prices always going up, and why is service always getting worse?
The idea was that we were going to break the shackles of government oversight and we would have all this new competition, and we would have lower fares and more service and better service. None of that has really worked out.
Studies have shown that the average seat size has shrunk by 3 inches in the last 15 years. But that hasn't stopped the airlines from charging you more if you don't fit in the seat that they just chose to shrink. Similarly, paying just to bring your bags on board a flight only started in 2008. And by 2019, the airlines were profiting nearly $6 billion a year from this gimmick. And what do they do with all that money? Spoiler, they aren't making air travel any better.
Frontier lost all our luggage!
So, we have the worst of both worlds with the airline industry. When they go to Congress asking for a taxpayer bailout, they describe themselves as a utility. But at the same time, they are run as a quote-unquote free market enterprise. We get to bail them out, and we get to pay to keep them running, even though we get nothing in exchange in terms of consumer protections from Congress or from the DOT. But at the same time, when times are better and the airlines start making money, where does that money go? Does it go back to the taxpayers? Does it go back to the passengers through lower fares? No, it goes into stock buybacks. It goes into executive compensation. It goes into executive bonuses.
In the last decade, 96% of the airline industry's free cash flow has been spent on stock buybacks. It's pretty clear that the government's approach in the past to approving airline mergers has been really terrible for everyone except for super rich CEOs and Wall Street.
I've never heard of a case where doubling down on bad policy makes it better.
So there you have it, folks. Consolidation of the airline industry has led to nearly every problem travelers today are dealing with, as crappy, high-cost service is increasingly becoming the only option. But the good news is, we're not powerless to stop it.
Thankfully, there seems to be a new team at the Department of Justice now in the Biden administration. They've been very robust about these issues of antitrust and consolidation and mergers.
The Biden administration is the first in decades to show willingness to fight growing monopoly power. The Department of Justice and the Department of Transportation both have the tools at their disposal to block this $3.8 billion JetBlue Spirit merger. And they need to act. Because at the end of the day, airline mergers are only good for 2 things, and that's lining the pockets of the shareholders and making sure the flying experience is miserable for the rest of us.